how did we meet? In a restaurant, of course.
Yes,
Of
as one
course.
does.
Is there another way to do it?
Not
met-
for me.
We met working together at a restaurant called Kimball House in Atlanta. Well, specifically Decatur, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised.
And I had moved down there professionally, worked around the South for a number of years, but we both kind of like coalesced in this space in 2015.
It was my first ever restaurant job.
Yeah.
I was working there as a maitre d', and it was at the time, place that was incredibly busy and did not take any reservations. I had a yellow legal pad, and that's how I tracked the 250 covers plus we would do most nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a juggernaut for sure. It was my first sous chef position. And it was a beast of a program to run. We had a very high volume oyster program that was run in like a satellite oyster shucking room. And we would do 300, 400 covers a night. People coming in for just bar snacks or like full course meals. And it was just a really interesting place to cut both of our teeth at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the foundation and bedrock of our working relationship was maybe like initially born in that place.
Did you start obviously you were co-workers. It was the friendship that kind of germinated from there. I mean, generally front of house and back of house don't get along particularly well. She's creating more work for you. You've then got to perform that work. Right? Or you do something wrong and then she's apologizing to the table. It's a whole thing. How were you guys able to establish like a successful rapport dynamic?
I think that restaurant had a culture where everyone was hanging out together, drinking cocktails and beers after work, front and back of house. It also too it is a restaurant still that has a really amazing, very reputable bar program, and I feel like the culture of restaurants that I've noticed that have serious bar programs kind of have a bit more of a glue between a front of house and back of house culture, because there is this creative, productive, I'm making a drink, I'm making this creative thing.
The craft element.
Yeah, with a front of house that kind of just instills a different kind of dynamic between the front and back of house.
And also I think the nature of it being like a Southern restaurant, there's just like more, I don't know, of a communal feel. There's more of a whole house feel in Southern restaurants. I think that hospitality workers in the South go above and beyond and just work their butts off. And it's really easy to, from a kitchen standpoint, respect the work that like a Southern server does. It's really inspiring to be around. And, you know, we also had like commonalities outside of work that formed like the foundation of a strong friendship. And yeah, I think we had like very similar ideas of where we wanted like restaurants to move and how the culture ought to shift. And that was very like baseline to a lot of our early conversations. Like, what is missing about the world that we're seeing in front of us? What is like movable? What is shapeable? What would we like to see change? And we agreed about a lot of things. And I think it really pushed us along to, you know, HAGS opening eventually and where we're at today.
What was the path that led to HAGS? Because I don't think it was a straight line.
No, definitely not straight.
And yeah, definitely not straight. And when we moved, Telly had lived in New York City prior to us moving here together in 2019. And when we did move here together in 2019, I was really eager to cut my teeth in more traditional fine dining settings as a newly minted sommelier. We did not have plans or ambitions or an idea that opening a restaurant in New York City was at all a possibility.
No, in all honesty, when I first moved here in 2019, or I guess this was the second time that I lived in New York, I was taking a big step back in my career. Not a big step back. I don't want to necessarily pitch it that way, but I was taking a break from running kitchens. I was the chef de cuisine at a great restaurant in Athens, Georgia called 5 and 10, under a very like well-known, big-named Southern chef, Hugh Atchison. And I was at a point of burnout. And, when you're burnt out, the first thing you think is, I'm going to run to New York City and work in Michelin-starred restaurants, right?
That'll be easier. Sure.
Sure, right?
I'm going to take some time off.
For me, I saw it as this opportunity to go back to the well and like find inspiration again, and like start at the bottom of a kitchen brigade and work my way up. And so I ended up at Contra on the Lower East Side and found like a really kismet space, a really inspiring space that was doing cool food, and I really respected the chefs. So for me, it was like, I'm going to come to New York. I'm going to grind my teeth a little bit, get my energy back, feel young again, have some fun. And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And that changed a lot for us.
And I think, speaking to what you were saying previously, Josh, about the existential spiral that the pandemic induced in so very many of us in restaurants, we were asking ourselves, why are we doing this? Why are we working this hard? What are we working for? How can we use the skills that we have done? The other job that I've had is like selling used guitars. Not really eager to go work at Guitar Center or anything like that. But how can we use the skills that we have in fine dining to make the world a better place, to make the industry a better place? And that's really kind of the idea that germinated HAGS.
That was the spark, yeah.
Which, I mean, taking the entrepreneurial leap in theory sounds great. But I mean, you guys have been in the industry long enough to know that you were going to go from working 50 to 60 hours a week for someone else to working 80 to 100 for yourself.
For sure.
So, but you also had the time, because, you think the pandemic era, your two friends, you're able to sort it out. When you decided to embark, when you decided to pull the trigger on this thing, to actually do it for real, what did winning look like for you?
I mean, for me, speaking just like personally, winning looked like opening the doors. And I think like speaking as a queer person, a trans person, ultimately having this like far-flung dream or goal of opening a fancy restaurant in Manhattan, it sounded so unattainable for me. And so success looked like doing it at all. And so I ultimately like attribute a lot of what became the hallmark features of our brand and our business as being rooted in like a deep naivety and like a brashness and a feeling that like this will never actually happen, this will never materialize, and so we're just going to throw the book at it and see what sticks. And then we did open, and then it was day 2 and day 3 and then month 2 and then year 2, and there was a learning curve to how do we integrate and sustain these like lofty ideas and goals with a business that is material and continues to exist, and we need it to thrive, and we need it to like provide jobs, sustainable jobs for our staff. And that's really been like the proving ground of HAGS for us. But for me, success looked like just opening. What about for you?
I think we've been talking a lot just within ourselves recently about the tangible and intangible, quantifiable and not quantifiable aspects of hospitality. And I think one of the defining differences between front of house and back of house is with front of house, oftentimes there is this kind of like chasing of something that is inquantifiable, which you can't quantify in a lot of ways. The feeling of hospitality, like what is a hospitable dining room, what is good service. There are things that you can do to progress that. There are things that you can do to make people not feel welcome in your dining room, for sure. There are things you can do to give bad service. I've experienced them plenty of time. I've done them also before. But I think for me, thinking about imbuing the spirit and the idea of what HAGS is in terms of a service and service style, service philosophy, has been a really long road and journey. And I only feel like recently we've gotten to a place where I feel like it is something really different from service in other restaurants in New York, different from service in other restaurants around the world. That to me is really what success looks like, is a definitively distinct style of hospitality that makes many different kinds of people feel seen and cared for and spoiled.
Let's talk about that. So this is going to come as a total shock to the two of you, but I am older than you by a lot.
I'm shocked.
And I come from a very different generation of restaurateur.
Yeah.
Where it's best in class service, and I think that we can, like, there's a lot we can align on. But I come from a generation where, like, you don't have opinions, especially like political or lifestyle based opinions. People would come into my bar and they would complain about Republicans, and I'd be like, me too. And then someone would walk in and they complain about Democrats. I'd be like, me too. I am what you are, because that is the culture of the restaurant industry. It is hospitable to kind of mirror whoever you're sitting in front of. I am a bastion of the past. And I think that the two of you are very representative of where the world is going. And I think what the younger generations want, and I know I sound like I'm ancient, and I'm not, but I also think the world moves much faster today than it did. I was just having an interview the other day, and he was like, the world just moves slower in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, even into the 2000s. And so, people want restaurants that have an opinion. And there's a lot of benefit to that, but also a lot of drawbacks, because that means people are going to have opinions about your opinions.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so you're also of a generation.
To plant a flag in the ground is going to elicit a response, but to not do that is
safer.
It's also going to put a target on you, right?
Yeah.
When you stand in front of your business, and again, I come from an era where chefs would stand out in front of their restaurants, but certainly not restaurateurs.
Yeah.
Like, how many restaurateurs do you know? Danny Meyer, that was it. And now, like, Danny Meyer, Will Guidara, and that's it.
Yeah.
People don't know restaurateurs. And I think a lot of that was just baked into the cake.
Yeah.
All of that to say, that is not your business model. That is not your culture or your community or your ethos. And so can you explain, like, the culture that you built, the community that you built, the intentional way that you did it? And then we'll talk about the impacts of that.
My perspective on it and why we did this in the first place. Number one, there is like such a heritage, like a legacy of queer restaurants, queer bars, like gay bars. Queer is obviously like current and modern nomenclature, but like gay bars have existed for decades and generations. And it was like safe haven. It was a watering hole, and all kinds of people felt called to those spaces for all kinds of reasons. When we started HAGS as a pop-up with the idea that this would be a brick and mortar, we were reflective of that. But also, I think at the time, and this continues to be true, it felt really essential to own this thing about ourselves so that it wouldn't be thrown at us. We could throw it at, the receivers. Like, we are queer people. I am a trans chef. This is not something that you see frequently. You should see it more frequently, but you don't. And I'm reflective of that. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to say it out loud, and I'm going to call to it so that, like, the barrier to entry into this space isn't limited by, like, the words that are thrown about in public or in secret about us that we're not owning for ourselves. We wanted to be proud of the space that we claimed as the people that we are. And we wanted people to feel proud coming into the space as whoever they were. We know whatever space we create, that's space for our diners, that's space for our workers, and everybody can use it equally. We just didn't know that it was going to become such a zeitgeist thing for us that we would be in a manner of speaking, capturing lightning in a bottle. But, coming out as a queer restaurant in 2022, it just really hit the ground in a way that I think people were ready to receive it. But that wasn't like our brilliance. That was more of our like naivety. We were excited to do this thing for ourselves, and it was a happy accident that it really landed with the community.
I think New York City is also a place that is so incredibly saturated as a market that having a flag to plant in the ground will make you more distinct than your neighbors or a similar concept. So there is, I think, in New York City, both a necessity as well as like an eagerness for people to embrace concepts that are a bit more niche. Mm-hmm. And that is something that just Telly and I, both as individuals, are individuals with weird niche interests. And so, of course, the restaurant that we build is going to be an extension of that. Mm-hmm. And, we named this restaurant HAGS. It's going to call to a specific kind of person. It's going to repel a certain kind of person. And that's all by design.
But it's so many flags. You planted so many flags. Like the next one that comes to mind for me is like the prefix menu.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like that's, I got to tell you, I would be way more likely to open a place called HAGS than I would be to launch with a prefix menu. And that's it.
Yeah. Spoken like a true restaurateur.
Yeah. For sure, man. Like that's right. I don't even know if the cultural stuff would piss people off as much as mandating a prefix menu,
No, I mean, listen.
I think you're right about that.
That's
for sure.
And we have always had our pay what you can Sundays where we do offer an a la carte menu, and we do, for the reason that one, the food is pay what you want, and two, that it's an a la carte menu, and three, everyone loves brunch. Volume as much as we can in an 18-seat restaurant on those days. But so much of why we're doing prefix, why we started doing prefixes, one, because of our experience, two, because there is not really a space that is so explicitly queer that is specifically a tasting menu. And three, because of the physical existing conditions of this tiny restaurant, really does lend itself much better to a tasting menu. We are in the coming months moving to a larger space, which we're really, really excited about, and we will be doing still a tasting menu. We'll have a chef's counter for tasting, but we're going to do a la carte 7 days a week. We've found that is a flag that we've planted in the ground that we don't feel so precious about standing by. It's not a dogma of ours. It's something that we've done out of necessity. Of this restaurant is so tiny. The kitchen is the size of a food truck. It's teeny tiny.
Yeah, and we knew in opening this space that to have a tight, concise, like 7-dish menu versus what the expectation for a la carte menus would have to be, it just made more sense to do lower volume, higher price point, and just have the food be really, really exceptional. And so tasting menu made sense on paper. And I think too, like in a very roundabout way, I wonder if people would feel scandalized enough by our brand to talk about us for years, and whether we'd be here talking with you if we didn't do something just like so audaciously outside of the realm of the normal. And in New York City in the 2020s, you really do have to be a little audacious to stand out and stay relevant for a significant amount of time. So it worked for us in a way, but again, so many of these decisions were made as like happy accidents through like first timer naivety, like first luck of the first in a way.
You said that the goal was just to open, and I remember that. I would have said that was true for me too until I fucking opened, and then I was like, now the goal is to not die or end up in bankruptcy court.
Yes.
I think that things change really quick. And you spoke to it earlier when you said, like, it's about providing a sustainable living for the people that you work with. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me and for a lot of entrepreneurs, I ran businesses for other people for a really long time and I was very successful at it, which is why I think I got the opportunity to open my own places.
Mm-hmm.
But like as good as I was at running other people's places, like I never laid awake at night worried about whether they were going to make payroll or not. I worried about everything else, but I didn't worry about that. And then when I opened my own place, I worried about everything else and I worried about that. And it was a very unpleasant feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, behind the culture in the prefix menu and all of this has to be an engine that makes money. I was just reading this statistic that 41% of all restaurants in America are at break even or losing money, which to a certain degree, being as like deeply steeped as I am in the industry and you are too, that could be an optimistic number,
I was going to say
Totally.
that number seems low.
Yeah, it depends
Quite
on the
low.
year. Depends on the year.
For sure it does. And so you guys started small, which I think gives you a lot of control, right?
Yes.
But it also limits your ability to generate revenue. You look at these like sushi concepts, these omakase concepts that have like 10 seats, right? And 3 Michelin stars. And like they can only run it for a year, right? 2 years, because eventually like the dollars just don't make sense. So I would ask, like, I would assume over the years, like you've really refined this to be as profitable as it possibly can be. But then all of those dynamics are going to change when you move to a new space. So
Yeah.
what are you going to double down on? What's worked really well for you in the current space? And how do you think that translates to a larger space?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head and like highlighted our motivation for making this big change is like we do have so much control over our business model, and that's been lovely in a way. But it does really kind of like cap you in this, plus or minus 1% range of like how much maneuverability do we really have in terms of like generating greater success for ourselves. And we can book out every night of the week and still stay within that little like pretty menial cap of profit. The idea of moving to the larger space is, in a lot of ways, fleshing out a more robust business model that has different, entry points, different price points. We can have different sections of the restaurant with different turn times, so we can like kind of like open the floodgates on the volume that we're able to do. We've traditionally only operated with a beer and wine license, so we'll be moving into a full liquor license and having a full beverage program, which will change things for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the two things that I am immediately thinking of that are other than just volume motivators for us moving is that we've really struggled to have events and buyouts be viable.
Sure.
And buyouts are such essential, easy money streams of revenue for any restaurant. And having an 18-seat restaurant where you can't just have like one big long table for your corporate buyout. You have 4 tables. They're all different shapes, and then a 4-seat bar, and then another just the layout doesn't make sense for buyouts, and buyouts are so crucial. And also liquor license. We don't have a full liquor license because we have a 4-seat bar that is teeny tiny, and there's not really room for a bar program. Like that takes space. We don't have space. And there's so much about truly everything about the restaurant that exists as HAGS is very much dictated by the spatial constraints. But I think that there is a lot that we have figured out in terms of leadership style, in terms of culinary vision, and we're not going to change those, but we're going to expand upon them in the new space. But really, to have the opportunity to have a PDR, to have the opportunity to have a more robust buyout package, to have the opportunity to have a full cocktail program, to have what I think is going to be a smaller ask of guests coming in is really important, because we do have we have a huge ask for guests who are coming in to visit us.
It's
currently.
a high barrier to entry.
It's 2 hours plus of your time, hundreds of dollars just to come in and eat, let alone, drinking anything other than tap water. So being able to offer more avenues of ways to enjoy HAGS, ways to experience HAGS, is going to, we hope, create more streams of revenue.
Yeah, I mean,
we're just limited right now.
Yeah.
And what translates? So, like, I can think of like a handful of places in LA. We're in a situation not exactly like yours, but similar, where either they lost the lease, or they had to move to somewhere else, or they wanted to move to a bigger spot, and like the magic didn't move with them.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is. And so I think it's hard to articulate. But what do you think that magic is, and how are you making sure that it moves with you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the magical elements of HAGS is how deeply intentional the space is. We made so many choices based on like our own personal tastes and predilections, and they're unique and they're weird, and we're weird people. And so we really imbued the space with like a lot of personality. In the years that we've been running the space, we've changed a lot, and we're ready to imagine a new intent for the space that is more forward thinking, that's more like futuristic in its own way. And so we feel like a great excitement to like bring this restaurant, this brand that I think is pretty identifiable at this point in New York, into like its adolescence, into its teenage years, and watch it grow into itself in a new way. But also, I think we've worked really hard to, like Camille said earlier in the interview, she has crafted a hospitality style that is very distinct and unique, and is very like evocative of the brand and what we've built here. And I think likewise in the food, you can look at a plate of food and identify it as a HAGS plate of food. You can taste it, and it tastes unique and different to the other restaurants in the neighborhood and in the city. And those elements, I think we're ready to put in a new terrarium and watch it grow into a larger body for itself. I think there's always been this organic and kind of wild spirited aspect to the brand where it can change at any moment. And this is a moment where we're going to push that change pretty radically forward pretty quickly. And that feels for us, for me at least, very inspiring and exciting. And I think where you have that inspiration and that excitement and that intent, that's where the magical will follow.
Yeah, I think that there's also a reality that I know that people are always going to compare
Sure.
2.0 to the 1.0. And I think that so frequently the people who are doing that the most are, people who are diehard regulars, or
or curmudgeons,
curmudgeons are never going to be happy no matter what. So I don't really worry about them. They're going to be curmudgeons no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing. But in talking to as many of the regulars as we have, when they found out the news that we're moving, they're like, "Oh, I'm so excited." Or people will be like, "Are you guys looking at moving into a bigger space?" And the answer is yeah, actually we've been looking for a long time.
Yeah.
And we are indeed going to be expanding into a bigger space. I think that to expect for ourselves to remain the same is never something that we've expected of ourselves, even maintaining HAGS within these four walls. I think that we've changed so many times, evolved so many times in the 4 years that we've been open here at this address, that in some ways we've afforded ourselves the fact that that magic is going to change
again,
period, no matter where we are, if we're moving or if we're not. And the magic is going to change. We'll have to embrace that. I think that to try to cling on to what the magic is to misunderstand what the magic is.
Well, there's also a really hidden benefit to being such a small restaurant, which is we do have a great cult following and a very like involved community. Our regulars are fantastic, and I know they'll follow us to the new space. But ultimately, with such a small restaurant, not many people have eaten here. So there are
Sure.
not going to be that many people that even know what the original version was. But I know there are so many people in the city and in the neighborhood that are like, I wish I could go to HAGS, but it's cost prohibitive or it's too small. And when we open the new space, I think we'll be able to invite a lot of first time diners that have been really hungry for their first HAGS experience. And that's really exciting.
I want to talk about your evolution as restaurateurs. So I joined this group called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and it was the first time that I was ever exposed to entrepreneurs outside of our industry. And I can remember I was having a conversation with a forum mate that ultimately led to like my third midlife crisis. Earlier than midlife, and he was like, "Oh, I mean, yeah, you're an entrepreneur, but like." You really just bought yourself a job. And I kind of sat with that because it really kind of felt like a kick in the nuts only because it was true.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really thought of it that way. And I think that like for so many of us that didn't graduate from the top of our class from Cornell University, not that there's anything right. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? Yay for those fucking people. But I think that most of us get the opportunity to own restaurants because we were great managers. We were great leaders within an organization. And so when you do get the keys and it's your turn to be a restaurateur, at least for me, I didn't step into the role of a restaurateur. I stepped into the role of a manager because that's what I was fucking great at. That's what gave me the ability to get my own place. And then it led to this whole crisis of, well, like, what is a restaurateur? What does a restaurateur do that I'm not doing? And that was a years long journey. And so, you look at this like massive, like turning point in your evolution as entrepreneurs. Like it is a reset. And like, in a reset, anything can change. Everything can change. Yeah. So as you re-envision the brand, are you re-envisioning your roles within the brand?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, we were just having a conversation, and we've had this conversation numerous times recently as we're like looking ahead to what the future of the brand is as it grows and we start to scale. Thinking about what does it look like to build a manager? Like, how do you take these unquantifiable, characteristics that we just kind of, we feel like we embody them. Mm-hmm. How do we take these characteristics and put them on paper and codify them and train people into them? How do we pass that torch effectively? And I think that's a journey that we're still on right now. Being in such a small space, it's hard not to be like a fingers deep operational manager. We're both very involved with the running of the business. And I think pragmatically, we see scaling this as a necessity for us to create space between us and operations, like daily operations. And so this is kind of a new journey for us to go on, and we're still feeling our way through it. But we're both lucky to have worked for some really great operational geniuses at other larger restaurants, like you working for Aldo Som and myself working for restaurants in the South, that I think gave us good models and blueprints for how to scale.
But yeah, I think to your point, Josh, it's so comfortable to step into the role of what it is that you know, mm-hmm. and to do the job of the managers who you hire. And I think that that's a mistake that I personally made big time. And one of the pieces of advice that we got from folks who were operators before we opened was, when you're opening, don't hire a sous chef, don't hire a GM, because you're going to be doing those jobs. And it's crazy advice when you're thinking about opening and you're like, oh, well, we need this team. Like, it needs to look like every restaurant that I've worked in. And when you're building a restaurant, when you're opening, you really are, as we at least were, wearing so many different hats. And our instinct is to manage people. And I think that one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is that we as restaurateurs are not only in the business of building a brand, building a concept, building a vision, but also having that be something that we can point to as tools for mentoring managers who then use those as North Stars in how they manage the rest of the team. Like, as a manager, your job is to, the sort of like traditional hierarchy in a restaurant is you learn how to do the job of serving or cooking, and then you graduate to training people how to do that, managing people to do those things, and then you train people how to train people how to do those things.
Yeah.
And that's really what a restaurateur's job is. And I am so tickled by that person saying that you just bought yourself a job, because I think that if you don't have that North Star, if you don't have that concept, if you don't have that vision, then yes, you really just have kind of bought yourself a job as managing managers. But if you have a vision and a reason and a purpose for those jobs to exist, then I think that differentiates you as an entrepreneur versus just a manager of managers.
Also, as we grew, one of my struggles is that the brands were so inextricably tied to me. Like,
Yes.
I owned a bar in Hollywood for well over a decade, and like when I walked into that bar, it got busier.
Yeah.
Every time without exception. And I got to tell you guys, that felt really fucking good until it didn't, know?
Until you wanted to take a day off.
Right, for sure. And then people would come in and they would say, "Is Josh here?" And they would say no, and then they would walk out. That's just not. And again, it's so my first independent venture was 900 usable square feet. 1,428 square feet in total. So to your point, it was small, it was manageable, right? And there was nowhere that you could look in that bar that you couldn't see me. Yeah. And so, and I was very personally invested in it. I love that thing. I love that thing like it was a person. And I loved every person that came into it. But I was 30, at the time, and single. And then, and then I'm married, and then I have a kid, and your priorities change, and you still love the thing and you want to see the thing flourish. But for me, what I struggled with was this expectations game.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. They weren't going to 504. They were going to Josh's bar. And what I needed them to go to 504. Right.
Totally.
Have you guys given any thought to that as you expand?
We're thinking, I'm thinking about it at an existential level every day lately, because we really did build something so deeply personal. And I think it being such a small space, people do have this expectation that we will be here. Over the past year, I think we've done some good work in building separation and boundaries around that. But we are like a chef-driven restaurant, and we have built a lot of the brand around, this is the executive chef. You're expected to be there, to be present, to be a face to the brand. And we were just at a design meeting today where we were like, and then we need to build a chef's counter here with a galley walkway so you can stand there and everybody in the dining room can see you. And so we are still falling prey to the traps of how do we juice this business and get dollars into the bank? How do we put gas into the tank, and using ourselves as the fulcrum of that. But I know pragmatically it's not sustainable. It is just kind of like a cheat code. And when you have it, it feels well, why wouldn't I just press it every single time? Money, money, money. And, obviously we're in the opening stages of our first scale project. And so we want to throw every little tool that we've got at it. But I do think that it's part of the conversation that we're having. How do we build sustainable relationships with this, not only for ourselves, but for our guests, where they feel like they're not building a parasocial relationship with us, but they're really loving the restaurant and enjoying the food and the cocktails, and that's why they're showing up.
And this, again, I think goes into training managers is, I think because this, maybe you experienced this similarly with 504,
If it's a mistake, I probably experienced it, Camille. If it cost you a gratuitous amount of money, I'm sure it's on my list.
We'll have to get a drink about all those mistakes some other time.
For sure.
Man, so much of, I think, how we have operated in the first couple of years is so much of this, like how we want things to be run, lives within us. And building those SOPs that are more external, so that anyone can do them the way that you want them to be done is something that I feel like I should have realized before day one, of this is how to lead. But I think so much of opening a restaurant, and this being our first restaurant that we ever opened, is that we were paving the road while driving on it. We didn't know exactly how it is that we wanted things, because there are ideas that you can have when you're opening, and then, to continue with the car metaphor, when rubber hits the road, it's like, oh, well, actually, this is the way that things need to be done. Mm-hmm. And I'm the person who is holding both the concept of the vision in my head and also understanding the best way in which I want for things to be done operationally for service. And then it's all kind of living within me how it is that I want for things to be done. Mm-hmm. And building that into something that is not just living within us is so hard, so challenging. And it's something that I feel like excited to not have exclusively
for sure
living within us, and can be something that we can pass on to other people. Because that I think is actually more rewarding if you're a manager, to be mentored to think about work like that, as opposed to like, hey, will you make sure that the servers are doing 35 roll-ups per person every day? Like, that's so mundane. That's so unstimulating, so unengaging. Why?
But they better do those fucking roll-ups, Camille. Yes.
We don't do those.
Mundane. Mundane. But you're going to do those roll-ups till your hands bleed.
Yeah, like there's always going to be, it's work, like there's always going to be a mundane aspect to it. But the way in which you like keep people engaged, and I think like the way in which at least I want to be engaged, is to have a reason of why we're doing things. Why we're doing things the way that we're doing things, and why we're doing things at all.
I think you bring up a great point, like this idea of why, right? And the ethos and the culture. And we're having these parallel conversations about SOPs and ops and compliance and all of these things to put labels on them. But then it's also mission and vision and values and all of these things. And I can only speak for myself. But, my businesses started doing much better when I stopped, because I was objectively a terrible manager. I think most visionaries are like, I can't manage myself in my own life, right? The best chefs I have ever known, right, are talented culinarily to the exclusion of almost every other skill that a human could possibly acquire. That's it. You don't want to go bowling with a chef. Like it's a thing, right? And but I think that's how we create excellence in a specific category. And so I spent years beating my head against the wall, creating, these ops plans and these SOPs, when like I couldn't show up to a meeting on time. And I'm like, how are we going to get everybody to be punctual? What worked well for me was acquiring that skill through hiring someone that was a better restaurant manager than me, because I was an objectively shitty restaurant manager. And
solidly type B individual. I need to delegate those, like, okay, this is what I want to be done.
Right.
How do you do that?
Whatever. They just get it done.
To you, I don't really care how it gets done, as long as you're not doing it like an asshole. And as long as like the reason and the ethos of like why we're doing this at all is respected and honored in the way in which things are done, and how it is being done. Period.
Well, and that's really the root of the question that I'm asking is, like, there are people listening that have been sitting in a single unit independent restaurant for 20 years who have been unable to get their themselves out of day-to-day operations, But like, you're going to be in like a new place, is a new person, right? Like, and it's this opportunity to really set yourself up for success. And so, what we had talked about was like training trainers, but like, you're at this crossroads where you really do have the opportunity to either like nurture talent
Mm-hmm.
or acquire talent. And I think that the decision is so rooted in, where you are in the life cycle of the business and knowing where you are in the life cycle of the business.
Yeah.
So how are you guys approaching, is it that you want to bring a GM up through the ranks, or you just want to bring like fucking killer from Union Square Hospitality Group over to do it for you?
Yeah, well, I think we have traditionally been like a promote from within kind of operation, and we really see the entry level positions in this restaurant as like building a farm team. Like, how do we bring in somebody with this, vein of wine experience? How do we bring in this cook with this kind of cooking experience and give them the other tools to become this like promotable, internally experienced manager? Because we really have built something so unique in this space that when we do hire managers from outside, we tend to have a steeper learning curve for them to get to success, and their success is inextricably linked to the success of our services, our hourly team. If their trust and their respect is disrupted, then our outside hire managers, their confidence drops, and then they're less successful. And so we've just found that like promoting from within and having a long learning curve, like a long trajectory from bottom to top, but having it be like a pretty simple through line, has been our greatest success in bringing management along. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah, because I think that it's harder in some ways to teach people to embody a concept than it is to teach someone a skill. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I really learned from Aldo. He would always say that like he hires based on personality, which, how in which he's doing that is that's maybe something that was at least living within him, or he at least wasn't sharing with me. But he, I think, would build his teams around what it was as individuals they were bringing to the team, how they were internalizing the work, and then the knowledge and the skills are things that you can teach people. Personality, values, and the reason why people show up to work are things that you can't teach people.
Yeah, I do think the goal of training somebody into management and bringing a team up, growing from the bottom, and like always having this vertical conveyor belt to the top, the goal should always be to replace yourself. If you are like deep in operations as an owner, then like your number one goal should be, how do I get somebody to like get to the top of this conveyor belt and then step into my shoes and promise success, so that like I can go and generate attention, relevance, cash flow off property elsewhere. And then if you can like have this space, to this maneuverability to move outside of the physical location, your ability to like secure cash flow just compounds. And I think that's where people get really stuck, is this idea that to replace yourself is to damage your brand, the brand identity, or like, maybe these unquantifiable aspects of ourselves, these characteristics that are so inherent and special to why we are owners in these like special relevant spaces. They can't be embodied in somebody else. And that's just kind of like an egotism, maybe a narcissism. You have to quantify it. You have to sit down with yourself, look in the mirror, take out a piece of paper and like write out everything that you do in a day, in a week, in a month, and figure out where the ingredients of that special sauce are and hand them over to somebody, so that you can take your special sauce and like spread it around and like act like you've got a butterfly net out in the world, just catching opportunities that otherwise are passing you by if you're locked in your restaurant.
Let's talk about that special sauce. My last question for you really comes down to what should we steal from you? It's well, you think about the tactics, the tools, the strategies that have taken you as far as as far as you've gone. The average restaurant lifespan, 80% of all restaurants close within 5 years. And here you are approaching your fifth year and you're growing, you're expanding. And I've also caught you at a really interesting time in your lives where, like, in choosing to expand, you've probably thought a lot about, right? Not just like, what would we change, but like, what's working for us? What are the things that we should double down on? I think restaurants are fucking problem factories, right? We can
Yeah.
talk about problems all day long, but if we all just focused on the things that we were doing well, the things that we were working on, and we just 10x that, magic happens. So
100%.
what are those things we should steal from you?
I love this question. Let me think.
I have been thinking about this a lot lately. I think if we were to boil down, for me, what I think is like quintessential to HAGS and why we're special at all, why anybody comes and why they come back, is because foremost to us, what our greatest priority is as like a restaurant group is how a person feels at all stages of their relationship to us. We care about how they feel when they find out about us. When they first hear our name, we want to have like a, a feeling emanating from our brand that like we are proud, we are, ready to include and accept and celebrate. We want people to feel in the space like they are living their best life. They're being fully celebrated. They're so comfortable. The lighting makes them look sexy. The food is like meeting their expectations and their perception of value. And I think what's essential also from my standpoint, and also with beverage in this space too, but like we write our menus and we build our recipes, like the actual materials that we sell that people put in their mouths and digest and stuff. We put a lot of focus on how it makes you feel after. And I think a lot of restaurants today, there's like this revivalism, this like new nostalgia thing going on, like cafe food, bistro food, 90s aesthetics. And a lot of that food is very heavy. It sits heavily with you. Steak frites, I'm looking in your direction. I love you, but you make people feel like shit. And we want to do the things that people want to eat. We want to cook food that like is of the moment and feels appropriate for what kind of dinners people are looking for today. But we use ingredients that we know will leave anybody that comes into the space feeling really, really good in their bodies, and we feed them the appropriate amounts. Obviously, we are like more controlling of that now because we're a tasting menu, so I can be very like granular about how much a person eats. We'll have to give up a lot of that control, and we'll share that control with the diners when we're a la carte. But ultimately, like we use really fresh ingredients that we get from the farmer's market. We cook with like almost exclusively domestic olive oil in the space. We're dairy free, we're gluten free, and we just are really conscientious about what we're putting on the plate in front of people. And then we're also really quiet about it because those things are not sexy to talk about. I shouldn't be talking about them right now, actually. When people find out that we're a gluten-free restaurant, I hope that it's always after they've eaten and they go, "Oh, that's cool. Great. How wonderful." But yeah, we think like very conscientiously about how a person feels at all stages of interacting with our brand.
Yeah, that feeling is definitely, I think, really paramount. And I think about care, like how to show care, how to engineer that within how we're running the business. I think as operators, as restaurateurs, entrepreneurs, maybe the thing that I'm thinking about for other people listening to this, to steal from us, is find a way to distinguish yourself. And I think that is something that we are always looking to do, and we have. I will toot our own horn. I think that we have that in spades in so many different aspects of how the by the glass list is, to what the menu is like, to us being incredibly accommodating of allergies and dietary restrictions. we have found many ways in which to distinguish ourselves from other people. And this is not to say that you need to have every single idea be totally original, or that, if I go out to a place and see that they have the same white wine by the glass, then I'm going to immediately pull it off, which I've done before, but also it isn't going to be my reaction 100% of the time, because if there are many ways in which you have distinguished yourselves as being different from other restaurants, there's a reason for people to come to you. And if there's a diversity of those distinctions, if you have one idea that turns out to be not as original as you thought it's going to be, it's not going to feel like as big of a deal. And you're going to have another idea,
Yeah.
Find ways to make yourself be like, oh, HAGS is so different for 8 reasons, not just like one,
Yeah, I think, in that, something that we talk about frequently is, if there are things that other restaurants on your block, in your neighborhood, in your city, whatever, all typically and traditionally say no to, and you're the one that says yes, you immediately build a through line to clientele.
I can't tell you.
If you can say yes to multiple of those no's, then you're just...
Vegetarians and vegans, like catering to always having a vegan menu, vegetarians and vegans have kept us in business.
Celiacs too.
Yeah.
Love them.
Yeah, but I mean, like, because we're not so publicly gluten-free, but we are very publicly
vegan. On the Reddit, people find out.
Everything is revealed on Reddit.
Everything's revealed on Reddit.
We, have always led with the fact that we have a fully vegan menu. So that is, that's like one of many things that distinguish us. But I think that's where you can have a lot of fun and a lot of creativity as someone who's developing the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Find those things that feel like exciting ways for you to distinguish yourself as a brand and lean into them.